everyone. Welcome again to Cornerstone Church. My name is Zach, and right now we're going to take a look at some of the upcoming events we have going on here at Cornerstone.
Church family, I'm super excited to bring to you the second, since I've been here, Family Game Night. It's going to be held on August 12th. It's a Saturday at 4:30 p.m. If you guys can bring a dish to share, childcare will be available. All proceeds will be on a donation basis. We'll go to Speed the Light, since our youth students are going to be watching our kids for us. But if you could come out, we're going to have classic games and some intense games. So make sure you guys make Family Game Night.
Are you interested in getting baptized in water? We'll be having a water baptism Sunday on August 27th. If you want to be a part of this special day, well then you must attend the water baptism class on Wednesday, August 9th at 6 p.m. Pastor Kermit will be teaching what baptism is all about and will be doing all the video interviews that night. If you want to be a part of this event, please sign up on your connection card where it says, I am interested in getting baptized in water. Every year, our church has a booth set up to sell ice cream and cobbler at Bethalto's Homecoming, and we need your help to make the ice cream. We'll be having an ice cream making day on Monday, August 7th, starting at 8 a.m. and going to whenever all the ice cream is done and made. Any help for any amount of time will be appreciated. If you have any questions, please see Vanita Anderson. And those are your announcements for this week. You can find out more about all these events and more on our website at bethaltochurch.com.
Good morning, Cornerstone. How's everyone today? It's great to see everyone, and I am really excited about today because this past week, I think it's 44 volunteers from our church went out to a campground, and we put on a camp for we had a couple that got sick and a couple of different issues. What was the final total of campers? 28 or 29? 28 campers this past week. It is one of, this is our second year doing this camp. And to be clear, to reiterate what Pastor Phil mentioned this morning, we're going to be hearing some stories about what happened this week at camp. And if for some reason, I can't really tell, but if there are children in here, just know that we're going to be talking about foster care and some of the things that happen that causes these kids to be in foster care. So we might be talking about, in a very general way, about abuse and those things. So just be sensitive to that if you've got anyone in the room that you're concerned about. Just want to give you a heads up on that. But Royal Family Kids Camp exists to care for and love these kids that we had at this camp, to treat them like royalty for a week. It's a week of fun. It's a week where they can be carefree. We give them a lot of treats, and we give them a lot of toys and opportunity to play, and it is just a life-changing experience. And what we're going to do is this. We've got 7 people that are going to share stories. Now, some of you are like, 7 people? We're not going to get out of here until 7 o'clock tonight. And I've talked with them about being succinct and to the point, and hopefully they will remember that and honor that. But this is an incredible camp. I just have to say, I'm so proud of our church. I want to thank those of you who sent a spouse maybe, and you had to hold down the fort while they were away. Some of you have given. Many of you have been praying, and I think you'll find today the benefits or the rewards or the blessings that have come because of your investment. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you first. I should also say thank you to Darla Brown. She is our camp director, and she has done an incredible job with that as well. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to ask those of you who are going to be telling a story today, if you can come on down to the front row here, and what we're going to do is right after just 1 second here, I am introducing a highlight video of some of the things that happened at camp. Now remember, you'll notice there's a couple times where the faces are blurred out. That's a DCFS requirement. We aren't allowed to show or really say the real names of these kids. So if you're wondering why there's an awkward blur over a child's face, it's because we want to protect their privacy. So with that said, if you're one of our people telling stories today, would you come on forward and just kind of line up here, and then you guys can go ahead and show that video.
Nothing excites us like Jesus, 'cause in His presence there's freedom. All of our sin is forgiven, so we give to Him the highest praise. It's the greatest
had a blast this week. We had a lot of fun, and it was one of those weeks where it's absolutely filled with joy and some incredible moments, but it's also just heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching at other points where we just deal with some of the raw emotion, frustration, and pain that these kids have gone through that's led them to be in foster care. So today, I'd like to start. I'm going to invite my wife to come up first, and it's not because I'm biased, it's because she told me I'm going to go first. And so my wife is going to come on up. If you would welcome her as she comes up to share with us today.
All right, well, I wanted to go first because I knew if I had to sit through other people, I would be a sobbing mess. So I am actually going to relay a story on behalf of one of our female counselors. Ann Twenty could not be here today, so this is her story, but we thought that it was worth sharing. Ann was a first-year counselor, and one counselor has 2 children. When you go to camp at Carlinville or at teen camp or kids camp, it's about 1 adult to 6 or 7 kids. But we just want to make sure that these kids get all of our time and attention, so it's 1 adult to 2 children. So one of Ann's campers was particularly challenging in that her emotional age was far less than her physical age. And that's fairly typical of these children due to the traumas that they have faced. And I would watch Ann throughout the week as her camper would have emotional moments over something that we would see or even our children would see as insignificant. And I watched Ann during these meltdowns of her camper, and Ann remained gracious and patient and sensitive during each episode, truly reflecting what it looked like to have unconditional love. Well, early Friday morning at about 3 a.m., a virus hit Ann's camper. But in true Ann fashion, she handled it with grace. She cared for the little girl during the next few hours while the virus ran through this little girl's body in more ways than one. She cleaned the camper's sheets, she cleaned the camper's clothes, she cleaned the camper's hair, and then she would have to repeat the cycle and do it all over again. And later on that morning, as Ann and we were waiting for the mother or the guardian to come and pick up the child, Ann and I sat on the couch with the camper in the middle of us. And I specifically remember a moment where I caught myself just sort of leaning to the opposite side of where the young girl sat because I was afraid to catch whatever virus she was dealing with. And right then I looked over, and the little girl just snuggles up to Ann. And instead of doing this, Ann just snuggles right into her, knowing that this girl is very sick, and puts her arm around and just pulls the little girl closer to her. And after the girl left, Ann and I sat and talked, and we were talking about Matthew 25, where it tells us that if you've done something for the least of these, you've done it for God himself. And Ann certainly exemplified that by serving a vulnerable child at this child's most vulnerable time. And later on in the day, Ann texted me with this. She said that caring for, and I'm changing the camper's name to Susie, caring for Susie in the early morning hours is when it hit me that I was meant to be at RFK, and I was meant to be with Susie specifically. God put me with her to care for her when she most needed it. You see, Ann is a mother of 4, and she's a wife of someone who works a lot of hours, and she had to figure out childcare for her own 4 children during the week that she was gone. I talked to her husband on Friday, and he told me that she planned out his meals as well. So it took a lot for Ann to come this week. And when she was cleaning up the mess of this girl at 3 a.m., it was confirmed to her that's exactly where she was supposed to be. And I thought, how Christ-like is that? Because Ann walked towards the mess, and it was in the mess, literally, that was confirmed to her that she was supposed to serve this child. So it was an honor to serve alongside of Ann and 43 other adults this week. So in the next few moments, you're going to hear from several of our other volunteers. And last February, when Darla and I talked about RFK, we specifically reiterated our need for men. We had more female counselors last year than we did male counselors, but we had more male children. And so we pleaded for men to step up in the roles of service. And you're going to see today that our church did exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Next up, we have Russ Nieders, who's going to share with us. This was one of the men that responded. It's his first year as a support staff person. Would you welcome Russell as he comes?
All right. In my line of work, I'm trained to observe and report. Today, I have the honor of reporting my observations of this past week. On Sunday, as we all sit up front here, I saw many of you come lay your hands on us and pray over us. On Monday, I saw the kids arriving and various emotions on their faces. Throughout the week, I witnessed a transformation in the works. I saw love, I saw bonding, and I saw great changes occurring in these children. By Friday, the changes were amazing. It all comes down to this: the hand of God touched each and every one of these children and each and every one of the volunteers. I saw firsthand the hands of God at work. What a wonderful transformation in these young lives I've seen. The experience for me has certainly reaffirmed how powerful prayer is and how God's hands can change the lives of many. I pray this continues on, as I have already committed myself for next year and for years to come. Thank you all for your prayers and support. God truly does change lives.
Amen. Thanks, Russ. Appreciate that. Next, I believe we have Scott Duncan. Would you welcome Scott as he comes? There you go.
So, Miss Darla, the last thing that she wrote on a whiteboard whenever she was prepping us was, "Blessed are the flexible." As I go over all my memories, I realize there was that theme going through all of them. So I applied to be a staff member, thinking that maybe next year I could be a counselor once I got more experience with kids and with what camp was. Because, you know, the counselors, they do the real work. The staff, they just set stuff up, right? So Miss Angela said, "Hey, could you be a puppeteer?" I can do that. Work with a game. She wanted me to do the dance moves with all the kids' songs. And I thought, I did that in high school years ago. And that's going to be my niche. I can really do that. So I'm like, "Angela, can I do all the songs?" "Sure," she says, right? Let's see. Then Darla came up to me and said, "We're going to have you be the mailman." And last year, apparently they had mail, but it didn't really work out all that well. So hopefully having one person permanently as a mailman would help that come about. It did, so much so that I don't picture our RFKC without a mailman position. And I think a ton of people would be really disappointed if it wasn't me as the mailman. So the first day, I did the puppet thing. And the puppets and the song and dance thing were right before mail time. So right after I did the puppets, sorry, Miss Angela, I just bolted. I had to get all the mail stuff done. I assume it went well. Thank you for being flexible. The next couple of days, there was even more mail. Let me tell you, all these guys did a great job writing so many letters. They kept me so busy. But you know, by Wednesday, I kind of got the hang of it. I was even able to go up front and do like one of the moves for the song, and I think I got a few weird looks from one of the counselors saying, "Why is the mailman doing these dances?" But yeah, I was running and carrying and sorting and supplying people with like envelopes and papers and stuff. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Like, seriously, when I get to heaven, I picture this kind of work being the kind of work that we do in heaven without the whole Adam and Eve curse thing. It was important. It was meaningful. And from what everyone says, I was good at it. The kids seemed to agree because whenever they did an award ceremony, again, I expected all the kids to come up and get an award for, you know, something special that they did over the week, and then the counselors to come up and say, "My campers were awesome campers." And then the kids said, "We want to hear the mailman. We want to hear the mailman." Everyone, 1, 2, 3, aww. You ever been put on the spot? But again, I was flexible, and I told him how much of an honor it was not to be the song and dance guy, not to be some guy that set up games, but to serve them all as their mailman.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. I want to just mention about Scott. He alluded to this, but Scott is the perfect mailman. He had this perfect hat, and he had this satchel bag that he was running around with that said mail on it. And you should see the kids' reaction when another counselor wrote them a letter or another camper wrote their letter. It was like the boys that I was a counselor for, I mean, they kept those notes, they put them in their bags to save, and our hope is that they will hold on to those for years to come. So it's a really important thing that Scott was doing. And I want to just take a moment to say, there's all sorts of things that you can do to be a part of camp. I mean, who would have thought that we would have had a mailman? But we found a role, and it served these kids in an incredible way. So thank you, Scott, for doing that. Next up, we have Chris Hammond, correct? Am I getting the order right? Chris Hammond. Would you come on up and welcome Chris? He's one of our counselors this year.
All right, good morning. So about a year ago, I was sitting where all of you are sitting now and hearing the stories that you're hearing now from the returning volunteers from last year's camp. And that was the moment that God spoke to me, and he said, hey, Chris, go ahead and plan on spending 40 hours of your vacation time at RFK in 2017. So I did last week, and it was a phenomenal experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. So the weeks leading up to it, I'll admit I was a little bit nervous, I was a little bit anxious, even a little bit apprehensive about what was to come, and people would ask me, hey, are you ready for camp? And the honest answer was, I have no idea. So I didn't know what to expect exactly, but when we got there and the kids arrived, it was just an awesome experience. So I had two young kids that I was their counselor. I had a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they were both very, very quiet. Like, I don't think they said anything to me the first day, and they said very few words all week. So it was hard for me to gauge whether or not we were really reaching these guys. And I would ask them throughout the week, hey, what's your favorite part about camp so far? And both of them had the same answer every time. They were different answers, but they gave the same answer every time. And the older one would say, oh. And and the younger one would say whatever we were doing at the moment. So if we were eating breakfast, his favorite thing was breakfast. And if we were on the water slide, then his favorite thing was the water slide. Until the older one, we had a birthday party, and the day after the birthday party, I asked him what his favorite thing about camp was, and with a huge smile, he said, the birthday party. So that was a moment that I knew that he was getting into this, and we were making memories, we were building relationships with these guys. And the younger one, I think one of his favorite memories from camp is he caught a fish for the first time in his life. I don't think he'd ever been fishing, and he caught a fish, and I'm sure that'll be a memory that he'll have the rest of his life. But the important thing is I think that they're going to be able to take those memories of camp and tie it back to the other things that they've learned about camp. We planted a seed. We introduced these guys to God and that Jesus loves them, and hopefully in the years to come, because like somebody said, we don't start over every year with these kids. Yeah. We build on that relationship every year with these kids, and I can't wait to do it next year and build that relationship again and build more memories so that in the future they'll look back and say, not only is that where I caught my first fish, but that was where I heard about Jesus.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Before our next person comes, I just want to mention we do have a birthday party that we do every year. On one of the nights, and it's because when they're in the foster care system, a lot of times their birthdays are overlooked, and we actually saw that firsthand this year. There was an interaction we had with one of the caregivers where the caregiver did not realize when the foster care's child's birthday was, and so had we not mentioned it, it would have been missed. And so that's the kind of, and the foster care people, and for the large part, are wonderful because they're bringing these children in their homes. But sometimes they just don't realize, they don't understand, or they don't know those particulars. So that birthday party is a really important time. Next up, we have Coach Tim.
Good morning. All right, so many of you don't know who I am. My wife and I and our daughter have been coming here for about a year now. So this was my first time at camp. I run the gym Shinobi Fitness, where a few of the members here come and train, where I teach obstacle course training and martial arts. I recently made the transition from full-time police sergeant to part-time officer at the Bethalto Police Department, where I've worked for the past 10 years. My role at RFK was as support staff for the counselors, ninja night leader, lifeguard, activities coach, and whatever else Miss Darla had me do. Little did I know that my role would change into something bigger. Up until a week before camp, there was still a chance that I would be needed as a counselor, but God had a bigger plan for me. As a member of the support staff, I had the opportunity to reach all of the children instead of just mentoring one or two. And thanks to one of the counselors, by the first day, all of the boys were asking Mr. Tim if they could see his muscles. The first night I got to lead and coach the boys at Ninja Night, playing in the woods on obstacles I had set up for them. All the boys received a ninja mask and ninja bracelet. You might have seen that in the video. The next day, while eating in the cafeteria, one of the girls heard that I was a police officer and said to me, "You look like the police officer that took me out of my house." Then she smiled. I replied, "It very well could have been me." As a police officer, I've had to handle many cases of child abuse and or neglect, working side by side with DCFS. I worked undercover for 3 years as a special agent on a state narcotics task force, and we covered 3 counties. Needless to say, I was not prepared for her to say that to me. The next day, one of the boys asked me if I would play Legos with him. Sometime during that hour that we played Legos, he stopped what he was working on. He looked up at me and he said, "Mr. Tim?" I said, "Yeah, buddy." He said, "I wish you could be my dad." Fought back my tears and said, "Thanks, buddy." I was not prepared to hear that either. I was just a staff guy. I didn't know this was going to happen to me. The same boy during an art project later in the week, where all the kids put their handprints on paper, they had to write their favorite part of the week. And this guy wrote, "Mr. Tim." This was brought to my attention by Mr. Drew. I again had to fight back the tears. I started receiving pictures drawn by some of the boys, so I started drawing pictures for them. Last week left a huge imprint on my heart and memories that I will carry forever. And this was God's plan for me. I want to thank Darla Brown, Bethany for being great leaders, all the counselors that were there for sharing your kids with the staff members, and obviously all the staff members that were kind of behind the scenes in some points, but everybody. This week there was one word that described it all, and love was it. It was love. And I am ready for next year. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. We're going to welcome Chad on up, and as he comes up, I just want to put in your heads there a little bit. Can you play Legos with a kid for an hour? No, you can make a difference. I mean, we're not talking rocket science here with this camp. You got to have some patience, but you can do this, and we can do this, and we are, and it's incredible. So, Chad, share with us.
I don't know if I can top Tim's. I was the one who put him up to the muscle task, though. So if his arms were a little sore, that's why. So this week was really hard to describe as far as preparation-wise that I had went through. You can ask Darla. I texted her about a week before, and I was really scared because I was like, I am so ill-prepared. I'm not qualified. She'll attest to this. I was like, I'm not qualified. I'm not going to lie, I thought about figuring out some way to back out. I was so scared because I'm the youngest male counselor, and I have no kids, and I mean, what can I do? Like, these kids, you might be getting the worst of the worst, and I haven't even had a glimpse of the best. Like I don't even know if my playing time works for them. But for about 2 months now, God's been laying something on my heart, and He's been kind of poking me in the chest, saying, "Get ready, and asking me, "Is your cup full? Is your cup full?" And all the time I would answer, I was like, "Yeah, my cup's full. My cup's full." And about a week and a half before camp, he said, "If I put one more drop in your cup, could you hold it?" And I was like, I think I can, yeah. Well, and then he tells me it's not full then. The only way you're going to know your cup is full is if you're running over. And as soon as I got to camp, I had 2 kids who the first day didn't trust me. One of them wouldn't sit by me for the first 2 days, like for meals. So you can ask Mike. He sat by Mike because he was his counselor last year. And I'm just thinking, I was like, God, I guess my cup's not full because I'm not running over. I'm not running over yet. And it was really hard because I'm like, those doubts came into my mind. I was like, am I doing something wrong? Am I doing it right? And I just didn't know. And by day 3 on Wednesday, they were both asking to sit by me. They were saving me a seat at lunch. They were saving me a seat at dinner. At night, we would have little 30-second talks about their day and how much they loved camp. And one of them asking me to open his Bible and show him how to read it, how to find my favorite verse. And I couldn't help think but go to Jeremiah 29:11. Talking about how God has a plan for everybody. Plans to prosper us, not to harm us, and to give us a future. And it broke my heart because in that moment I realized that just loving on these kids, that was the overflow. Because I can't fill my cup up by myself. It's God who does it. He's just asking that some people would be willing to be able to stand there in the midst of the mess and let God just pour in and multiply what you've offered and what you've given so it can run over into somebody else. So that's my weekend. I'm forever changed. And I mean, I can't speak for all the other guys, but it's life-changing. If you have a chance to serve in any way, I ask that you would.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm going to take this moment after that testimony just to say, there are a variety of ways to be involved with Royal Family Kids Camp. And we're going to do this again next year. We're going to be making plans. Not everybody has to go. But I think some people here, I think God's probably calling you to go. And you need to pray about that. You need to consider that. I mean, these are people here who have been sharing, who took time off of work, away from families. I mean, like their vacation time. It's a big commitment. There's a variety of other ways you can be involved, going and helping with the birthday party, being a part of that event, and just showing up at camp for that time period. We have a tea party for the girls. We have a guys' night. We did Ninja Night this year. And giving. We need people to give. We need people to pray. There's all sorts of different ways that you can be involved. And I do want to challenge you, though. It's easy to, let me just say, sometimes it's easier to write a check. But I'm telling you, getting in there and being with these kids, it will change you. And it's an incredible experience. We've got one more story to share, testimony, and that's Don Flack. Would you welcome him as he comes?
So I spent some time last night through text with Pastor Eric and most of the morning trying to get out of doing this, which many of you know is out of character for me. I'm also going to read here in just a minute, which is out of character for me. I'm pretty comfortable in front of people speaking, but I can't get through what I'm about to say without reading it, I think. And it's something that God put on my heart that I emailed to Eric yesterday. Before I do that, quickly, a couple quick thoughts about camp. One is it is life-changing. I find myself now praying that I never lose what I've gotten this past week. The biggest thing I've struggled with since camp is this feeling of just being totally unworthy of the blessing we've had being able to share with these kids. You see people in a completely different light. I've gotten to know people in this church in a new way, and I've grown my feelings for them and my respect for each and every one of them in a way that you just can't get outside of seeing this kind of ministry. To put it in a nutshell, Mike Hasty and I got to be pretty good friends this week, I would say, got to know each other a different way. We had a talk on Sunday last week about what to expect. I had never done this before. And Thursday night, which was a tough night, the kids are at the point where they realize it's about over and they're not happy about it, so it's a tough night for the kids. I had spent Wednesday not eating because I was a little bit ill. Woke up Thursday morning at 4 a.m. feeling a little ill, but instead of caring for myself, Mr. Drew Henniger had a little guy who had an issue. We spent about an hour cleaning up and taking care of that little guy. So my morning started a little early. And Thursday night, you go through all that. So Thursday night, Mike asked me, late at night when we're all just hanging out together. So you're going to come back next year. And I'll tell you what camp is, and this just came to me at the time. I can't imagine putting myself through this ever again, mentally, emotionally, physically, but I can't imagine letting you guys do this ever again without me. So with that in mind and knowing this unworthiness of the blessing, this all happened Friday when we got back. And I emailed this to Pastor Eric. So on Friday, as Pastor Eric was praying our last little get-together here when camp was over, I found myself praying for God to do work in the lives of these kids, to do his work in them. Then as clearly as God has ever done with me in prayer, I don't often claim to hear God's voice, but more just feel like a nudge in a direction when I'm praying. But this time he spoke to me and said, I did it. Clearly and unmistakably, I did it. As I was wondering whether it was real and if this is me talking to myself, if this is God, he let me know that it was done. Not, I've got this, not, I'm going to do it, not that I'll take care of these kids, but it's already done. He completed it. And I felt a peace, and I wanted to share it with Pastor Eric right then. I wanted to tell the group, but it was out of my comfort zone to talk like that and say God told me something, so I didn't. And then afterwards, we're cleaning up, we're unloading trucks, we're getting ready for a little dinner we were going to have, and I kept telling myself, go to Pastor Eric and tell him this, and I just never did it. So that night, Friday night, and most of my family's out of town, so I'm sitting home, and I was thinking about my own failings and my issues in life and feeling unworthy, and God spoke to me again, this time more of the gentle nudge that I'm used to. But he was telling me he's patient with us, just like we were patient with those kids. See, we were trained for months to get ready for this camp, and that these kids are imperfect. They have issues. And we're trained to expect that and to be patient and kind to them. And knowing this allowed us to cut them slack and love them through their imperfections and the roughness within them. How much more does God know us and recognize our own need for his mercy and grace? And Darla, if there's anything I'll never forget, it's those words, mercy and grace, that she's pounded into our heads. God doesn't hold our past against us any more than we were allowed to hold the past of these kids against them. Then he hit me upside the head one last time. When he said I did it earlier Friday, he didn't mean I just did it at camp. He didn't mean there's some moment of something I just did. It was the cross. See, he doesn't sweat it when we mess up or look at our imperfections because he already took care of it. There's nothing more he has to do to forgive us and get us past it, whatever it is. He has unlimited mercy and grace because he paid more than enough to cover it all a really long time ago. He did it for us just like he did it for those kids. We just have to accept it and then pass it on, which is what we had the privilege and honor to do this past week. I don't know why this simple and elementary points hit me so hard right now. It's nothing I haven't been trained in this church for the last 40 years, but it's really hit home. And I can't encourage you guys enough to know that. He did it. It's done. Accept it and pass it on. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Don. Today, in just a moment or two, we're going to remember and celebrate communion together. And I thought Don's comments are really fitting to kind of transition us into that. I'm proud of us. Oh, I don't know if it's proud or not, but we didn't cry as much as last year. I think we were more prepared for what was going to hit us. But this is an incredible thing. I mentioned to some guests that were there, they're going to be starting a camp next year. They wanted to visit one of the nights, and I talked to them, and I said, there's something about a camp like this that is just like the bare bones of the gospel. Like when you get down to what we're called to do as Christians, this camp emulates those basic core ideas of what it means to be a follower of Christ and what it means to be a Christian. In the Old Testament, there's a prophet named Micah who is prophesying to the people of God, to Israel, and he's talking to them. There's actually a lot of chastising that he's doing. And he says this in Micah chapter 6, verse 6. He says this, with what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come to him, before him, with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? He's talking about the sacrifice system, the expected way that you worship God, to go and give your lamb or to give your ox or to give your ram. Verse 7 says, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? And then he says this in verse 8, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I've been reading through what we call the minor prophets. Micah is one of the minor prophets. It's this whole kind of collection of smaller books of prophecy at the end of the Old Testament. That's where my yearly reading has taken me. And this part of this verse here is on repeat throughout this part of the Old Testament, because what happened was the people were beginning to trust their sacrifices, if you will, their church attendance, their good deeds, their outward expressions of worship. And what God does with these prophets, and what he does here with Micah, is he calls them to something different. He calls them to something more basic. And it's like, yes, you should worship. Yes, you should offer sacrifices. But don't miss out on the heart and the reason and the purpose behind all of this. And I just want to remind us today of what we are called to do as a family of God. And much of what we are called to do was done this past week at this camp. I am so proud to pastor Cornerstone Church. I love being able to go tell my friends, man, we paid for and put on and fully staffed a camp for 28 or 29 kids in the foster care system. It's incredible that we do that. Look, our church does some great things. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be at the homecoming. You know, it's important for us to have a presence in our community. It's important for us to rub shoulders with our community, sell some ice cream. Sure, we'll make a little bit of money off of that. But it's important for us to support the community in those ways. But we are called to something greater than that. We are called to sacrifice. We are called to break ourselves open and to pour ourselves out, just like Christ did for us. And we are called to make an actual difference in the lives of people. And I believe that what we've accomplished this past week in the lives of these kids, through throwing a football with a kid, or painting a painting with them, or holding a girl's hair while she vomits, I believe that's gospel work in action. And church, I don't know what mess you experience or that you're around or what messes in life circle you, but you are called to walk towards that mess. And is it messy? Absolutely. Is it difficult? Yes. But it is the most rewarding thing that you will ever do when you go in with the love of Christ and say, I'm going to sacrifice and it's not about me. It's not about my comforts. I wore a pink necktie thing and did a ballerina dance at the talent show because of this girl who needed somebody to have some confidence to go with her and do that. I don't care. That girl smiled when I did that. That girl was appreciative, and I made a fool out of myself, but I did it for Christ. I did it as an investment into her life. And church, yes, we can do this next year at camp, but we better not wait another year. Tomorrow, this afternoon, this week, all of us have opportunities to break ourselves open and to pour ourselves out, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before our God. Not, oh, look at the thousands of rams I gave to you, God. Not look at the 10,000s of rivers of oil. Look at all these great things. No, to walk humbly before God and say, God, like several of these people have said today, God, I don't even know what I'm doing. Could you use me? God, I'm not even sure that I'm equipped for this. That's probably the best place that you can be. Because when you do that and you go in not knowing what you're doing and feeling ill-equipped, that's when the Holy Spirit comes in. And He takes care of it. He's got it worked out. He'll give you the words to say. He'll give you the confidence that you need. He will support you in that. And you will see the growth that you never thought that you could do on your own. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of play this out here by celebrating communion today. Because what we've done is we've kind of, we take communion as a staff on Sunday night when we get to the campgrounds. But we're going to remember what Christ did for us. And these crackers and this juice, that's all it is. But there's meaning behind it, right? Because as we take these things and we hold them, let's be mindful of the great sacrifice that Christ has made for us. And please understand something. As much as we rejoice, and we should, in what Christ has done for us, we ought to have some conviction that we need to now go do the same for others. So this is remembrance of what he's done, but it's also in anticipation of what he will do through us as we go through, as we live out this faith. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask us just to pray. I'm going to ask our communion servers to come on forward. They're going to go ahead and get the trays. And we're going to take some time to reflect on the sacrifice that has been made on our behalf. Would you join with me in a word of prayer?